Well, good afternoon, everybody. It is February 6th, 2021. I'm Jim Hodgson with the Fun With Aviation Museum, home to the most touchable warbirds in Texas. I'm out on location today by myself. I'm out at the former Hicks Field, the World War I training base. Actually, it was also a World War II training base. But I'm out here at, the address is 10300 Hicks Field Road, just off a little bit north of Saginaw. And we're going to talk today a little bit about the significance of this airfield and flying training in general in World War I and throughout the period of time here that this field was in operation. This is an industrial park today. It is no longer an airfield, hasn't been an airfield probably since the late 60s, I think, or 70s. The Hicks Field that we know of today is a few miles north of here off of Bonds Ranch Road. But the site that we're on now has been called by a variety of names. When the First World War started and they decided to establish airfields here for the Royal Flying Corps, Fort Worth in general was referred to Camp Taliaferro. Now, Camp Taliaferro, and you will notice when, if you ever see it written out, it looks like Taliaferro, but it's pronounced Taliaferro. The field or the training complex was named after Walter Taliaferro, who was an American Army pilot who was killed in, I believe it was 1915, in San Diego, and so the complex was named after him. It's going to be a little hard for me to read questions today, but I'll try to catch up with those as we go along. I'll move a little bit closer. So the three airfields were established and built to be able to train the Royal Flying Corps pilots, along with, and it's going to be noisy out here, I told you it's an industrial park. Okay, good, you got me. So along with the Royal Flying Corps pilots that they were going to train, they agreed to train 300 American pilots who were referred to as the 300. You will find books or stories about the 300. Of those 300, there were also a number of naval aviators, the original naval aviators who were put into the mix. Well, the airfields were rushed into production. 1,200 men came out and started to build the three airfields. This one was referred to as Taliaferro I. It's had many other names. It's been called Jarvis, Camp Jarvis. The other two airfields have been called Camp Edwards. This has been initially it was Hicks Station because this is on the Hicks Ranch. Was on the Hicks Ranch, and the railroad tracks were right near here. But the Royal Flying Corps, with their airplanes and mechanics and everything, showed up here in 1917 and spent the winter here, 1917 to 1918. So they hoped to have the field started and completed, but they never did. They finally got it completed, but it wasn't ready when everybody got here. So for those of you who are weather historians, and I know there's a bunch of you out there, I run into them every day. Actually, nobody knows, has ever had the answer to this. The winter of 1917-18 here in Texas was one of the largest snowstorms ever. So when the airmen showed up here, and the mechanics and the instructors and everybody showed up here to start training, a lot of the facilities were tents. There was snow everywhere. There was reports that when they went to the cook tent to get their breakfast, by the time they got back to the table, the meals were frozen to their plates. So it was a real challenge initially until everything was up and running. Now the three fields were built almost identical, and although behind me you're seeing a double-arched hangar from World War II, along the line behind here, pretty much it goes all the way up to the north and some way down to a little ways down to the south from here. There were as many as 19 hangars along Hangar Row out here, the World War I hangars, in addition to infirmaries and schoolhouses and barracks and officers' clubs. The only building that still survives out here from World War I is a very small building that's about, I would say, 20 by 30, heavy concrete. It's just down the street from here. You can see it if you drive up Hicksfield Road. Small building, concrete building, and that was the ammo building where the ammo was stored. That's the only building that remains from out here. Over the years, there have been a number of things that have happened that have taken away the remnants of the First World War and even the Second World War. There have been a number of fires out here over the years that have burned things down. But during the First World War, they flew primarily Jennies here, and I know there's people out there going to tell me my numbers are wrong on some of this, and that's fine, because there's places you can get the exact ones. But they were training 10 squadrons out here. This field was really the aerial gunnery field. This was the advanced training field out here. And so in addition to the 426 acres that comprised this airfield, and I'm going to just refer to it as Hicks, this airfield, there was also an additional 12,000 acres that gone to the west, to the north, the south, and to the west, all the way out to the lakes. That was part of the training areas. There were trench works that were built out there. There was a number of targets, water targets, where they had silhouettes of airplanes. There's still one in existence off Bonds Ranch Road. A silhouette that was dug into the ground, filled with water, so that the observers and instructors could see the splashes of the bullets. They had zip lines for a while out here to try to teach aerial gunnery, but they found that it just swayed around and made everybody sick, and that didn't work too well. They had floating targets out in the lakes and in some of the ponds around here. So this whole area was training, and essentially advanced training, while basic training was going on in Benbrook and in Everman. Now, they were using primarily the Jennies, the JN4 Canadian Jennies, which were referred to as Canucks. The tails were different, a little different geometry. The biggest difference on the airplane is that they had operating ailerons on both the upper wing and the lower wing, which the American Jennies did not. So the pilots really preferred those. They were far more maneuverable. As we progressed and we got into the war and we continued the training, we started to bring other airplanes into the training environment here. So they were using Thomas Morris Scouts, for instance, over at Everman. They had DH-4s. Those were essentially the bombers, and they were teaching some of that over there with formation and bombing in general. Carruthers was an aerial reconnaissance squadron, and some of the first aerial photography for the United States was started out here and developed out here with some of the cameras and things. There was an area to the west of Fort Worth that was part of an artillery range and had 10 miles of trench works out there for training and also for photography purposes and that type of thing. They used Thomas Morris Scouts there for a while, in addition to the Jennies, of course. And then up here at Hicks, they continued to use the Jennies, but they also introduced the Spads up here. So there were Spads here. You're going to hear some airplane noises as we go through this, and it was kind of interesting to me today because I came up and drove around a little bit to see what's changed, and a lot has, especially the area around here since the last time I've been out here. And it was kind of interesting to be looking over an empty field with fill dirt put out in the fields and things like that here, and to look at it and think that at one point in time there was nearly 400 hours a day of flying that was going on here. The reports are that for the 3 fields here, there was up to 1,300 hours a day of flight instruction taking place. And just think about how much that is. That means airplanes were in the air flying all the time. It was just constant. There was lots and lots of flying. People were seeing it all over the Metroplex and all over this area in particular. And it just brought to mind a little bit to me as to how many young boys were inspired by that. How many people were inspired by the aviation that was taking place out here. So there's a little airplane going by now, and so that sound came to me. In addition to the sounds of the little airplanes, I've been seeing T-38s and things like that flying by, and my guess is that the vast majority of people who fly over this area, which was actually bigger than Meacham Field when Meacham was established in 1925, of 426 acres, it was one of the biggest airfields in the area for a long time, and it was used throughout World War I and then again into World War II and even after that. So people fly over this all the time and don't realize that this in many ways is kind of a birthplace of aviation for North Texas. So behind us, what we see is that this field was open from about 1917 till about 1920, doing training for the Army Air Service after the Royal Flying Corps left. They were training mechanics here. They were training all kinds of services here. They had dope shops and fabric shops and wood shops and power and engine shops and all of that to be able to not only instruct and teach people on it, but also do the maintenance here. Lots of crashes. There was a total of about 39 deaths from accidents that took place in the 3 fields, but lots of accidents, and in many cases they could just walk away from them because we're talking about fabric and wood and not necessarily the kind of things that take place today. And we also have the trains with us today too. So all totaled, there was trained about 2,000 pilots in the 3 fields out here, about 4,000 mechanics, which was in line with what they were expecting and hoping to be able to do. Afterwards, training kind of progressed to different things. Well, it was shut down in 1920. The field stayed open as kind of a public field for a long time. It stayed on the charts, you can see that, and then as World War II started up, prior to the war, they started the civilian pilot training program, which was civilian instructors training cadets to be pilots because they knew there was going to be a need for that in the Second World War. So out here, there were 2 flying schools who did the civilian flight instruction. A lot of the buildings were gone by that point in time, but they constructed these these double arch hangars that you see behind me. There were only about, I think it was 4 of them that were out here. That was not nearly as big a complex as it was during the First World War, but it was still very active. And they flew PT-19s out here, and lots and lots of them. I don't have the numbers on how many people they trained, but the training took place out here from about 1941, I believe it was, up through the end of the war. One of the things that was kind of interesting that took place out here is many of the pilots after the First World War stayed here in Texas or came back out here to this area. And there were 43 known World War I pilots who were referred to as the old men, or the old flyers. And you consider that they were probably 40, 42 years old, so they were the old flyers, they were the old men. But they took it upon themselves to make all of these cadets who were coming in here welcome. And they wrote letters to the families telling them that their boys were going to be taken care of well, and that the people in Fort Worth were friendly, and all the rest of that. In fact, they used to, I think it was a once-a-month dinner that they did down at the Rivercrest Country Club, where they would go down there and introduce the cadets to the people of Fort Worth and some of the young women of Fort Worth. So it was a very social thing that was going on here. And there were also a lot of activities that where people would come out and see what was going on from the flying standpoint. So a lot of that flying took place here. After they left here, after they got their basic training in PT-19, most of them then went down to San Antonio and went to Randolph for more advanced flight training and to be inducted into the military. They went to some other places, but Randolph seemed to be the place that most of them went to. So after the Second World War, the field kind of went into, again, it kind of went back to a public state for a while. General aviation, I think there was, I've seen some things that suggest that there may have been some attempts at commercial aviation out of here, but still you had a big open field of approximately 425 acres of land anywhere, anyway, space. There was a control tower that was put up during the Second World War, way down off to the northeast corner. It's all private land now. I'd like to get out there and see if there's anything still out there, but it's difficult because now behind us this is an industrial park, and it's a growing industrial park. So there's not a lot of remnants of what took place here in the First World War, but Bill Morris and I were out here a few years ago and taking a look, and what we did find is that many of the buildings along the row here, which was Hangar Row, many of the buildings' foundations are still here, and many of the buildings that are out here are built on the foundations of the hangars from the First World War. You know, it would be very difficult to get rid of some of that concrete, all of the concrete that was out here. So as you drive along, you can see remnants of those foundations. You can see that in some of the other cities too, like in Benbrook and of course out in Everman. But here it's still the case. You can still see those foundations. So after the Second World War, and we've got 2 of these double arch hangars that still exist out here. They're not hangars any longer. They're just sheds more than anything. And in fact, I don't even think they're sturdy enough, because I noticed there's nothing parked underneath them today. So at any rate, so the Second World War, we had the PT-19s. Let's see, what do we got here? Whoops, it went by too fast. Something about my grandfather. We'll pick up on any of these questions later on. We'll pick them up when we go online and take a look at them and answer them. But that wasn't the end of Hicks Field. After the First World War, back in 1951, Bell Helicopter moved here from New York. It moved to Hearst. With it came one of their newest developments, which was, I believe it was the XHSL. It was a 2-rotor helicopter. It wasn't the 20, the Banana. It was one even before that. And you can find some pictures of those helicopters out here at Hicks, being used in training and development out here. They started to build some of them here along with the Bell 47. And it was a helicopter that was being built for the Navy for anti-submarine warfare. So there was secret training that was going on out here with those helicopters for a period of time from 1951 through 52 or somewhere along and through that time period. After the 1950s, the airplane remained on navigation charts and air navigation charts as a public field, or as a general aviation field. I can't tell you that there was much that took place out here. Most of the buildings by that point in time, other than a couple of some of the double arch buildings here, were gone. They'd either been reclaimed or fire had taken place out here and they'd been destroyed. So we get down to today, it's an industrial park. None of it is preserved, none of it is marked with historical markers. We've done what we can to try to bring public information about this field and the other 3. One of the things that you can do is go online. There's a great website that's called, and I may have this wrong, but you'll get it if you Google it. The website is called Abandoned and Forgotten Airfields. And it's a great website. The Royal We, Bill Morris, has helped contribute to information on that website, and it's a great place to go and see pictures, see the aerial maps of the training area here. That was the gunnery field and aerial gunnery field and the targets and that kind of thing. A lot of those kinds of maps are out here. A lot of pictures from all 3 phases that were out here. Got to tell you one story before I end it here for today. One of the deals out here with the aerial gunnery was that you would go out and they would give you this parachute and you'd put your name on the parachute, and you would go out to the area, to the training area, and you would throw the parachute out of your airplane, and then you would try to shoot the parachute up. Well, they had ground crews that would collect the parachutes and they would bring them back to the base, and this always took place on like a Friday. And so they would bring the parachutes back, and they'd count the holes up in each one of the parachutes, and whoever had the most hits on their parachute would get an airplane for the weekend. Now I know Carl Schroeder was on here, and I know there's other people out here that flew, and I can just imagine that if you were at NAS Kingsville or one of the Air Force training bases and you were doing your air-to-air gunnery, hold on. And you're doing your air-to-air gunnery, and you did the best for the week, that they just let you say, hey, go ahead, take that TA-4 by yourself and just go fly wherever you want with it. But at any rate, that's what they were doing with the Jennies here. And the Jenny practice was not only the pilot shooting out of the front, but they also had the gunner in back, who didn't have a seat, by the way. He had kind of a pole, kind of a T-shaped pole that he could sit on, but most of the time he was in the back, and they're not wearing seat belts here either. So at any rate, so it was a challenge. So one Friday afternoon, the planes are going up to do this stuff, and so 2 airplanes went up, and they went up and they threw their parachutes out. But what they didn't realize at the time is how windy it was that day, and the prevailing winds were from the west to the east, which they are here. And so they went out into the training area and they threw their parachutes out, and it was going to be like, I'm going to beat you and I'm going to get the airplane and you're not. And these guys just had their time of it, shooting up the parachutes. What they didn't realize is the parachutes had drifted over the field here. So while they're up there concentrating on shooting up the airplanes, they're strafing the field. And they strafed it and strafed it. Fortunately, nobody got hurt, and of course, nobody got an airplane that weekend to go fly anywhere. So that's one of the stories that came out of here. There's some other great books that are out about this, considering that people learned to fly in the 20s and jets came in around the 50s. There are a number of pilots who flew Jennies and then ended up flying Boeing 707s and things like that. So there's a great book out there called From Jennies to Jets. See if I can get one of these questions. I don't think I ever came close to hitting one of those towed banners. Yeah, Carl and I both, you know. So at any rate, aerial gunnery is really difficult. It's not simple, and when they were doing it out here, there were no lead computing gun sights or any of that. It was all iron sights, and it was Kentucky windage, and probably probably luck more than anything else. So at any rate, that's a little bit of the stories. The field was officially closed somewhere, I believe, in the late 60s into the 70s. It started to become an industrial park, and as you can see from the noise here, it's constant traffic with all kinds of things. There's oil operations out here. There's part of the fracking operations out here. Let's see, another question. Checking in, thanks for sharing this. Well, you're welcome. This is what we do, and we like to do it. This is how we're trying to keep history alive for everybody. In addition to some of the people, I'm going to bet dollars to donuts that none of these truck drivers who are going by here have any idea what took place out here, and how this is one of the real crucibles and birthplaces of aviation for North Texas, and especially for Fort Worth and what's taking place out here. So I'm going to pick up the questions online a little bit later. It's a little tough to see the questions without getting way up close to the phone. So again, I'd like to thank you for being with me here today. I hope you've picked up some information that's new and interesting, and I'm going to refer you back to abandoned and little-known airfields. You can spend hours on that website, I guarantee it. So from the old Hicks Field, the original Hicks Field, Camp Jarvis, Camp Tolliver, Tolliver number 1. This is Jim Hodgson with the Fort Worth Aviation Museum. Stay safe, be well, and we'll be back with you later in the week. Thank you.